Number 1. The Cocaine Bales. Picture the winch straining harder than it should. The crew leans in, expecting the usual silver churn of fish. Instead, the net breaks the surface heavy and square, and outspills a heap of shrink-wrapped white bricks bound in tape and rope, seawater sheeting off them. On the docks of Florida and the Gulf of Mexico, fishermen have a name for this. They call it a square grouper. The phrase goes back to the marijuana running years of the 1970s and 80s, when so many bales washed into nets and onto beaches that coastal towns treated them like a strange seasonal catch. The joke stuck, but the cargo changed. Today the bricks are far more often cocaine, pressed into kilo blocks and stamped with the logo of whichever organization made them: scorpions, stars, crowns. Investigators read those stamps like a maker's mark to trace the route the load traveled. These bales reach the seabed in a few ways. Smugglers moving product up through the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific will jettison everything the moment a Coast Guard aircraft or radar contact appears. They accept the loss to avoid the arrest. Other loads are weighted and dropped on purpose, cached on the bottom for divers to retrieve later. And many simply sink when their flotation fails. Cocaine sits close to the density of seawater, so traffickers pack the bales with cork, foam, or sealed air to keep them buoyant. When that engineering fails, the load goes down, and a bottom trawler scraping the same shallow shelf is exactly the thing that finds it. The scale is staggering. The United States Coast Guard regularly reports single seizures of more than 12,000 pounds pulled from the water at once. A single kilo brick can carry a street value between $25,000 and $150,000, depending on the country. For a fishing crew earning a modest wage, a net full of that is not a windfall. It is a danger. Traffickers track their lost loads, and there are documented cases of crews being followed and threatened. The law is blunt about it. A finder must surrender the drugs, and keeping them is possession. So the disturbing part of a square grouper is not the drug itself. It is everything attached to it. The violence, the surveillance, the quiet understanding that someone very dangerous knows exactly what fell off their boat. But not everything a net drags up is modern contraband. Some of it is 2,000 years old. Number 2, the trawled Roman Amphorae graveyards. The next haul comes up caked in mud and barnacles, and inside the net are clay jars. Tall, two-handled, tapering to a point. These are amphorae, the standardized shipping containers of the ancient Mediterranean, and some of them have rested on the seabed since the Roman Empire. For centuries they carried wine, olive oil, grain, and garum, the pungent fermented fish sauce Romans poured over nearly everything. When a merchant ship went down, its whole cargo settled into the dark and stayed there, stacked in the pattern of the sunken hold. The Mediterranean floor holds tens of thousands of these wrecks, most of them never discovered. The explorer Robert Ballard mapped a cluster of deep Roman wrecks on the Skurkey Bank on the ancient trade road between Rome and Carthage, and found trails of scattered amphorae, marking each lost ship. A single vessel could carry an astonishing load. The Madrague de Gien wreck off France held between 6,000 and 7,000 jars. Here is where the story turns dark. A bottom trawl is a weighted net dragged across the seabed, held open by heavy boards called otter doors. When that gear passes over an ancient wreck field, it does not carefully lift the cargo. It smashes it. Jars that survived intact for 2,000 years are dragged from their context, cracked open, and left as shards in the net's wake. Archaeologists have watched through remote cameras seabeds that were once dense with standing amphorae reduced to bare drag scars and rubble. Something is lost that no museum can recover. A single jar's shape and stamp can date a wreck and name its home port, using a classification system built by Heinrich Dressel in the 19th century. Some jars still hold residues, grape pips, resin linings, fish bone that reveal what ancient people actually ate and traded. Trawling destroys that evidence before anyone can sample it. The United Nations flagged the practice as a direct threat to underwater heritage in a 2001 convention. Yet modern trawls now reach depths of 800 to 1,500 meters into waters once thought archaeologically safe, and enforcement across such a vast seabed is nearly impossible. Netted amphorae feed a black market in antiquities sold to collectors as decorations, orphaned from the history that gave them meaning. It is an erasure with no storm behind it. It happens quietly, haul after haul, industrial and unrecorded. And the net does not only return objects. Sometimes it brings up things that were never meant to be seen alive. Number 3. The oarfish. It comes over the rail like a length of living metal, a silver ribbon, thin and impossibly long, with a crimson fin running the entire length of its body and a crest of red rays rising from its head. Laid on the deck, it can stretch longer than the boat that caught it. This is the giant oarfish, and it is the longest bony fish known to science. Specimens are verified to about 8 meters, reliably reported to 11, and rumored, without proof, to reach 17. For most of human history, this animal was a monster. When an oarfish surfaces sick or dying, it undulates along the top of the water in slow serpentine curves, and that image seen from a wooden ship is almost certainly the origin of countless sea serpent legends across the world. Its range is global, which is exactly why the same myth appears in so many separate cultures. The oarfish lives in the twilight and midnight zones, roughly 200 to 1,000 meters down, and it is so rarely seen alive that nearly everything we know comes from dead or netted specimens. The first footage of a living giant oarfish in the wild was captured only around 2010 by a remotely operated vehicle in the Gulf of Mexico, hanging vertically in the water in a strange head-up posture no one had expected. In Japan, the fish carries an older meaning. It is called Rugu no Tsukai, the messenger from the sea god's palace, and its appearance is said to warn of a coming earthquake. The belief gained force because roughly a dozen oarfish stranded in Japan in the year before the Great Tohoku earthquake of 2011. But when researchers led by Yoshiaki Orihara examined the record statistically in 2019, they found no meaningful link between oarfish and quakes. The pattern was coincidence and clustering. The real driver is far more ordinary. Storms and strong currents push weakened deep-sea animals toward shore, which is why strandings come in waves, as they did off Southern California in 2013 when 2 large oarfish appeared within days. The fish itself is gentle, feeding on krill and small crustaceans, its silvery skin coated in guanine rather than true scales. It can even shed part of its tail and survive, which is one reason length estimates run so wild. The oarfish is the exact point where mythology and marine biology meet on a deck, a real animal that built a global legend. And sometimes the net does the opposite. Sometimes it takes something ordinary and turns it into a monster. Number 4. The blobfish. You already know this face. The slumped pink blob with the drooping nose and the downturned frown, crowned years ago as the world's ugliest animal. What almost no one realizes is that this creature does not actually look like that. The blobfish, properly the species Cycrolutes marketus, is a deep-sea sculpin that lives off the coast of Australia and Tasmania at depths of 600 to 1,200 meters. Down there, the pressure is roughly 60 to 120 times what we feel at the surface, and down there, the blobfish looks like a fairly normal, slightly tadpole-shaped fish. The melted face is not its natural form. It is an injury. When a trawl net drags the fish up from a kilometer of depth in minutes, the sudden collapse in pressure ruins it. The blobfish has almost no skeleton and no gas-filled swim bladder, because a gas bladder would be crushed at those depths. Instead, its body is made of a loose gelatinous flesh that is very slightly less dense than water. That jelly lets it hover just above the seabed, waiting for crabs and shellfish and drifting scraps to come to it, spending almost no energy. It is the perfect design for the deep and the worst possible design for being hauled to the surface. Without pressure to hold it together, the flesh sags and expands into that famous collapsed shape. The most photographed specimen was nicknamed Mr. Blobby, collected during a research trawl called the Norfans Expedition in 2003. In 2013, the animal won a public vote for the world's ugliest creature, run by the Ugly Animal Preservation Society, and the image went everywhere. But the joke hides something serious. The blobfish is caught almost entirely as accidental bycatch in deep-water trawls chasing species like orange rowfear and deep-sea crabs. It has no commercial value. It is simply hauled up, ruined, and thrown away. Later footage from remote vehicles showed related sculpins alive at depth, looking nothing like the melted meme, which finally corrected the record. The blobfish grows to about 30 centimeters, with loose scaleless skin and a bulbous nose, and some studies suggest females guard thousands of eggs on the seabed. It became a mascot for deep-sea conservation precisely because its ugliness made people pay attention, and that is the unsettling twist. The blobfish is not a horror of the deep. We made it into one by dragging it somewhere it was never built to go. Some catches, though, are genuinely armed, and some are dying because of the very net that lands them. Number 5. The sawfish. The thing tangled in the mesh looks like a mistake in evolution. A long, flat body, pale underneath, and jutting from its head a rigid blade lined on both edges with teeth, like a chainsaw bar carved from cartilage. This is a sawfish, and despite the shark-like shape, it is actually a ray. 5 species survive, and every one of them is endangered or critically endangered. That toothed snout is called a rostrum, and it is a remarkable instrument. The teeth are not true teeth, but tough denticles, and the blade is studded with tiny electrical sensors called Amphorae of Lorenzini. With them, the sawfish can feel the faint electric fields of fish hidden in murky water or buried in sediment. Behavioral research by Barbara Weringer in 2012 showed the animal swings the saw side to side to stun and impale prey, not to dig as people once assumed. The largest species, the large tooth and green sawfish, can pass 6 or 7 meters in length, and that same magnificent rostrum is the reason the animal is vanishing. A saw lined with teeth is almost impossible to free from a net. It tangles instantly, and entangled sawfish usually die or are killed by fishers who cannot safely release them. Sawfish are a textbook example of bycatch driving a species toward extinction. Global populations have fallen by more than 90% over the last century, and the animals have disappeared from roughly half of the places they once lived. They were once found far up rivers in the Amazon, the Zambezi, even in Lake Nicaragua, because they can move between salt and fresh water. Now, they cling to a few strongholds. Northern Australia holds one of the last healthy populations. In the United States, a remnant of small-toothed sawfish survives mainly in the Everglades and the Florida Keys, protected by federal law since 2003 and by a global trade ban. The signs of their decline are eerie. Scientists have documented virgin births, parthenogenesis, in wild Florida sawfish, which happens when females are so scarce they reproduce without mates. And in 2024, a mysterious mass mortality struck the Florida Keys, with sawfish spinning and dying in the shallows, prompting the first ever attempt to rescue the species in the wild. They live more than 30 years and mature slowly, so recovery, if it comes, will take decades. Handling guides now beg fishers to cut the net rather than the animal. The sawfish links a shocking catch to a real tragedy. The net that lands it is the same net erasing it, but not everything the sea returns is alive. Some of it is the wreckage of a war. Number 6. The Trawled World War. 2. Aircraft and aircrew remains. The net snags on something solid, and when it finally comes free, the crew pulls up a corroded propeller, a fragment of aluminum airframe, and, caught in the mud, a single chain holding an identity disc. In that moment, a routine fishing day collides with the wreckage of the deadliest war in history. Tens of thousands of military aircraft were lost over water during the Second World War, and the seabeds of the English Channel, the North Sea, the Mediterranean, and the Pacific are scattered with them. Fishing trawlers hit these crash sites constantly. The aircraft rarely survive as whole machines. Salt water and electrolysis destroy steel quickly, so what remains is usually an aluminum skeleton, engines and propellers encrusted with marine growth spread across the seabed as a debris field. Nets snag those fragments as what fishers call fastener hangs. Occasionally, though, the net brings up something far heavier to carry: human remains. The remains of aircrew who never came home, sometimes accompanied by boots, watches, flight logs, and the metal identity disc that can put a name to the anonymous. When that happens, the find is no longer salvage. It is a war grave. In the United Kingdom, the Protection of Military Remains Act of 1986 designates many of these sites as protected graves, restricting any disturbance. In the United States, the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency works to recover and identify service members lost at sea, sometimes acting directly on a fisher's report. Modern DNA analysis has reunited families with the fate of a relative missing for more than 70 years. The Channel, in particular, preserves aircraft remarkably well. In 2013, the Royal Air Force Museum raised a German Dornier bomber from the Goodwin Sands off Kent. the only surviving example of its type left in the world, exposed not by a net but by shifting sand. The Pacific holds an even vaster field, seabeds littered from Midway to the Solomons by the largest air war ever fought. Cold water, low oxygen, and burial in sediment can preserve not just metal, but organic material for decades. The law and simple decency require fishers to report remains and suspected war graves rather than keep artifacts. And many snag sites later become protected heritage locations, shifting from a fishing hazard to a memorial. The disturbing part here is not strangeness. It is the sudden intimacy of it. A stranger's death quietly kept by the sea, handed without warning to a fishing crew who only came out for the day, and then the sea returns to the impossible again, with things that are simply unbelievably large. Number 7, the Japanese spider crab. When this one comes over the side, the whole crew stops. Spread across the deck is a crab whose legs span wider than a grown adult is tall. From the tip of one claw to the tip of the other, a large Japanese spider crab reaches close to 4 meters. It is the largest arthropod on Earth by leg span, a living creature that looks like it belongs in a monster film. And yet the reality is almost the opposite of what the body suggests. The species, Amphorae Amphorae, is named after Engelbert Kempfer, a German naturalist who documented Japan's wildlife around the year 1700. Its genus name means large hands. It lives on the Pacific side of Japan, usually between 150 and 300 meters deep on sandy and rocky bottoms. And it is caught commercially in small trawls, especially around Suruga Bay, where it is considered a delicacy. The body itself, the carapace, is only about 40 centimeters across. Almost all of that terrifying span is leg, and the legs are spindly and surprisingly weak. This is not a powerful predator. It is a slow, gentle scavenger, picking over the seabed for dead animals, shellfish, and algae, and camouflaging its shell with sponges and anemones to hide. It may be one of the longest-lived arthropods in the world, believed to reach up to 100 years of age, growing to its enormous size slowly over decades in cold, dark water. That slow life is also its weakness. A female can carry up to 1.5 million eggs, but almost none survive to adulthood. And heavy fishing pressure led Japan to impose seasonal catch restrictions to protect breeding populations in spring. The crab's exoskeleton is heavily armored and spined for defense against predators like large octopuses, but molting leaves it soft and vulnerable for a time, though it can regenerate limbs lost to accident or attack over successive molts. Aquariums around the world keep Japanese spider crabs, and their tolerance of captivity has helped scientists study that remarkable longevity. In popular media, the animal is often called a living fossil, and its family does reach back millions of years in the fossil record. On the deck, it looks like a kaiju, a creature dragged out of legend. In truth, it is a shy, ancient, almost delicate animal, and the horror is entirely in the eye of the beholder. Some seabed animals, though, are shaped precisely so they will never be seen, until the net finds them. Number 8, the angel shark. At first, the crew cannot tell what it is. The animal in the net is flattened, broad, with wide wing-like fins spreading from its sides, a shark's tail behind, and a wide sensory head in front. It looks like a shark and a ray fused into a single wrong shape. This is an angel shark, and its strangeness is the product of a life spent hidden. There are around 23 species in the genus Squatina, and many of them, including the common angel shark, Paupor, are now critically endangered. The angel shark is an ambush predator built for the seabed. It buries itself in sediment until only its upward-facing eyes are exposed, drawing water to breathe through openings called spiracles on the top of its head. And then it waits, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. When a fish passes overhead, the angel shark explodes upward in a strike that lasts a fraction of a second, seizing prey on needle-like teeth, built to grip and swallow rather than cut. It is a low-energy hunter perfectly matched to the cold, dark bottom. That perfection is exactly why it is disappearing. An animal that lives buried on the seabed is catastrophically vulnerable to a net dragged across that same seabed. The common angel shark, Squatina squatina, was once abundant across the northeast Atlantic and the Mediterranean. Bottom trawling has driven it to near extinction across most of that range. Its lineage is ancient, with angel shark ancestors appearing in the fossil record in the late Jurassic, roughly 160 million years ago, and it survived the age of the dinosaurs. It may not survive the age of the trawl. Today, one of its last strongholds is the waters around the Canary Islands, where a monitored breeding population hangs on, and rare northern records off whales have led to habitat protections there. Conservation groups tag and track the survivors, pushing for protections against bycatch. Historically, the animal was sold for food, often labeled as monkfish, and its rough skin was used as an abrasive called shagreen. Like the sawfish, it reproduces slowly, giving live birth to small litters, which means populations collapse fast under pressure and recover painfully slowly. On deck, it reads as unsettling, a predator that does not fit any category. In the water, it was invisible, and that invisibility could not save it. After the hidden and the endangered comes something the net can barely hold. Pure, astonishing bulk. Number 9. The Ocean Sunfish. The net comes up looking like it has caught a wall. Filling it, pressed against the hull, is a vast gray disc of a fish, flat as a plate but the size of a small car, with a fin jutting from the top and another from the bottom, and a small, almost startled eye. This is the Ocean Sunfish, and it is the heaviest bony fish in the world. Large individuals weigh around 1,000 kilograms, and a related species, the bumphead sunfish, holds the verified record at roughly 2,744 kilograms from a specimen caught off Japan in 2003. The body seems unfinished. Instead of a tail, the sunfish ends in a rounded rudder called a clavos, which gives it the look of a giant head that simply stops. It can reach more than 3 meters long, and from the tip of one fin to the tip of the other, over 4 meters tall. And it drifts through the open ocean, eating mostly jellyfish and other soft drifting prey, occasionally diving past 600 meters and then rising to bask on its side at the surface, warming up and letting seabirds pick parasites from its thick, rough skin. That skin hosts more parasite species than almost any other fish. The sunfish is also one of the most fertile animals alive. A single female can carry an estimated 300 million eggs at once. Her larvae start as tiny star-shaped specks just 2.5 millimeters long, and the growth from that speck to a 1-ton adult is among the largest size increases in the entire animal kingdom. Despite its bulk, it is gentle and harmless to people, though its sheer mass makes it a genuine hazard to small boats in a collision. The name mola is Latin for millstone, a nod to its round, gray, rough form. It has no ordinary swim bladder, relying instead on light, cartilage-rich tissue to stay afloat. Sunfish are heavily caught as accidental bycatch. In some Mediterranean swordfish driftnet fisheries, they once made up a large share of the total catch. The species is eaten in parts of East Asia but banned from sale in the European Union, and it is listed as vulnerable. As recently as 2017, a whole new species was described, the hoodwinker sunfish, named by the researcher Marianne Nygaard, hidden in plain sight for centuries. The sunfish startles a crew not because it is dangerous, but because it is so impossibly large and strange. And the last catch is stranger still. It walks, it tastes the seabed, and it talks back. Number 10. The sea robin. The final animal on the deck does something no fish is supposed to do. It spreads a pair of wide, brilliantly colored fins like a bird opening its wings. It splays a set of stiff, finger-like appendages beneath its body, and it begins to walk. Then, unmistakably, it grunts. This is the sea robin, called the gurnard across much of the world, and it is one of the most quietly astonishing creatures a trawl ever brings up. The walking is real. The lowest few rays of each pectoral fin are separated into free, leg-like appendages, and the fish uses them to creep across the seabed. But they are far more than legs. Research published in 2024 by teams at Harvard and Stanford found that these fin rays are packed with sensory cells and function as true taste organs. The sea robin walks the bottom and tastes it at the same time, hunting for buried crabs, shrimp, and small fish by feel and by flavor. The scientists showed that the legs evolved from ordinary fin tissue, making this humble bycatch fish a live model for how evolution invents something genuinely new. The sound is real too. Sea robins vibrate special muscles against their swim bladder to produce grunts, croaks, and drumming that are easily heard when the fish is landed on deck. Those noises were among the biological sounds studied by the United States Navy in the middle of the 20th century when researchers were learning what the ocean actually sounds like underwater. The name robin comes from the red coloring and wing-like fins of many species. The northern sea robin reaches about 40 centimeters, with a heavily armored spiny head that can make it awkward and even painful to handle. For generations, fishers dismissed gurnards as trash fish and threw them back, but chefs across Europe have since turned them into a prized meal. When threatened, the fish flares those vivid pectoral fins in a startled display, a flash of color meant to make a predator hesitate. It lives on sandy and muddy bottoms from the shallows down to a few hundred meters, spawning in the warmer months and releasing floating eggs whose young settle to the bottom as they grow their strange walking rays. It closes this list not with horror, but with wonder. A fish that walks, tastes the ground beneath it, and speaks when caught. 10 catches, and behind them all, one uncomfortable truth about the machine that finds them. Step back from any single haul, and a pattern comes into focus. A bottom trawl does not choose what it finds. It scrapes the floor of the world and lifts whatever is lying there, all mixed together, is the entire history of the sea. In one fishery, within a few miles of seabed, a net can pull up modern contraband, 2,000-year-old cargo, the wreckage of a world war, and animals whose lineage predates the dinosaurs. The gear makes no distinction between a smuggler's bale and a Roman merchant's wine jar. That is what makes the trawl an accidental time machine. It samples every layer of the past at once, blindly, in the same drag. The reason it reaches so much comes down to design. The net is held open by heavy otter boards that plow along the bottom, and the whole rig covers enormous ground, sweeping sediment, structure, and everything embedded in it. Modern fleets have pushed this method deeper and deeper into waters once thought untouchable, expanding the footprint year after year. The ocean is an unusually good keeper of what falls into it. Cold water, darkness, low oxygen, and burial in fine sediment slow decay to a crawl, preserving aluminum airframes, clay jars, and soft tissue alike for decades or millennia. The sea holds these things patiently, and then, without warning, hands them to a fishing crew who never asked for them. The contrast with real archaeology is stark. A scientist excavates a wreck slowly, recording exactly where each object sat, because the position is half the story. A trawl destroys that position in an instant, turning an ordered archive into loose rubble. What is lost is not just the object, but its meaning. The context that tells us who made it, carried it, or died beside it. Most of the seabed is completely unmonitored, so most of this happens unseen, logged only when a haul is strange enough to make the news. Fishers end up as unintentional discoverers and first responders, caught between earning a living and dragging a wrecking bar across the past. Each of the catches so far is really one layer of that buried record surfacing on its own. Crime, antiquity, war, and biology all returned by the same indifferent machine. And among those layers, one is being actively destroyed as it is discovered. The sawfish and the angel shark are not just strange catches. They are casualties, and they point to something larger happening on the seabed. Bottom trawling is one of the most physically destructive activities humans carry out in the ocean, and the animals most exposed to it are precisely the ones that live on and in the seafloor. A sawfish cannot avoid a net its saw was built to tangle in. An angel shark cannot flee a drag passing over the sand it is buried in. Their whole way of life places them directly in the path of the gear. Worse, these are slow animals. Sawfish live more than 30 years and mature late. Angel sharks give live birth to small litters. Both reproduce far too slowly to replace what industrial fishing removes, so their populations do not just decline, they collapse, and then take decades to recover if they recover at all. The damage comes in two forms. There is direct bycatch, the animals killed in the nets, and there is habitat destruction, the scraping away of the nursery grounds and ambush habitat they depend on. The signs of stress are becoming impossible to ignore. Female sawfish in Florida have begun reproducing without mates, a last-ditch response seen only when a population is dangerously sparse. In 2024, a mass mortality sent sawfish spinning and dying in the Florida Keys and triggered the first wild rescue effort for the species. International agreements like the CITES trade ban and national protections exist, but they mean little where enforcement cannot reach across open water. What survives now clusters in a handful of strongholds: the Canary Islands for the angel shark, Northern Australia and Florida for the sawfish, and if those fail, the species may follow. There's a bitter irony running through this list. The blobfish, the sunfish, and the sea robin were all for years treated as worthless bycatch, hauled up, ruined, or discarded without a second thought. The same indifference that wastes them is the indifference driving the sawfish and the angel shark toward extinction. Recovery would demand modified gear, protected habitat, and a change in what we are willing to drag from the bottom. The biology and the human artifacts are not separate stories. They are the same story of a machine that takes without looking. And some of what it takes was once a person. Of everything a trawl returns, nothing weighs on a crew like human remains. When the net brings up the bones or belongings of a lost airman, the catch stops being a curiosity and becomes a responsibility. The remains of service members lost at sea are war graves, protected by law in many countries and owed a basic dignity, and the personal effects that come up with them, a watch, a boot, an identity disc, are what make the loss real. These are the objects that let modern DNA analysis put a name to someone missing for 70 years and give a family, at last, an answer. The human dimension runs through the other finds too. The contraband bale carries the violence of the trade that dropped it, and the danger that follows anyone who recovers it. Even the ancient Amphorae are human stories, the record of sailors and merchants who crossed the same water and did not make it home. A wreck is a time capsule of the people who were aboard it, not just the cargo they carried. What unsettles us about these finds is that they blur the line between an artifact and a grave. The sea democratizes discovery. It does not hand these things to trained archaeologists or naval officers. It hands them to whoever happens to be dragging a net that day, and with the find comes a choice: to report it or to keep it, to treat it as heritage or as salvage. Museums, heritage bodies, and recovery agencies exist to handle what surfaces, to identify, to repatriate, to memorialize. But they depend on the honesty of the person who pulls it up. There's a recurring, uncomfortable pattern in all of it. The sea preserves the machinery and the objects far better than it preserves the people. So what returns is often the shell of a human story with the human at its center long gone. That is why these hauls stay with a crew in a way a strange fish never does. They are reminders that the seabed is not only a habitat and an archive. It is, in places, a cemetery. And the strangest thought of all is how little of it we have ever actually seen. For all that trawls drag up, we have directly observed only a tiny fraction of the deep sea floor. The overwhelming majority of the ocean bottom has never been seen by human eyes or a camera, which means every haul is, in a sense, a blind sample of a place we do not know. That is why nets keep returning genuine surprises. Somewhere in the tens of thousands of undiscovered wrecks scattered across the world's seabeds lie cargoes, aircraft, and whole ships that no record accounts for. And it is not only history that remains hidden. New species still turn up in trawls with startling regularity. The hoodwinker sunfish, a fish that can weigh as much as a car, went unrecognized until 2017, hiding among a species people thought they already understood. If an animal that large could stay unnamed, the number of smaller creatures still uncatalogued is almost certainly vast. This creates a painful paradox. The same deep trawling that destroys ancient wrecks and endangered animals is also, accidentally, one of the main ways we sample the unmapped deep. We are erasing parts of the seabed before we have studied them, discovering and destroying in the same motion. The oarfish is a reminder that the line between legend and biology is thinner than we assume. It was a monster for centuries before it was a fish, and it turned out to be entirely real. The blobfish is the opposite reminder that appearances deceive, that a creature can look like a nightmare only because of what we did to it. Between those two lie all the animals we have not met yet. the ones that will come up in some future net looking impossible until a scientist gives them a name. Cryptid claims and genuine undescribed species are not the same thing, but the ocean is large enough and dark enough to keep generating both. What a Trawl returns tomorrow could be a 2,000-year-old ship, a species new to science, or the answer to a decades-old disappearance. The unsettling truth is that we are racing our own gear, trying to map and understand the deep before we scrape it away. And that race frames the last thing worth saying about everything the sea gives back. Return, one last time, to the image of a net breaking the surface, heavier than it should be. Everything on this list arrived that way, without warning, without ceremony, dragged from a place that keeps everything and explains nothing. The seabed is an indifferent keeper. It does not sort crime from antiquity, or war from biology, or wonder from tragedy. It holds them all in the same dark, and when the net comes down, it surrenders whatever happens to be there. What the disturbing catches share is that none of them were meant to be seen. The smuggler's bale was meant to sink and be forgotten. The Roman jar was meant to rest undisturbed. The airman was meant to be at peace. The blobfish and the oarfish and the angel shark were meant to stay in a world of crushing pressure and permanent dark, unbothered by the light. The trawl is a blind witness to all of it, and there is a cost to dragging the bottom of the world without looking. Some of what surfaces is pure wonder, an animal that walks and tastes and sings, a crab out of a legend that turns out to be gentle. Some of it is genuine loss, a species dying in the same net that reveals it, a history ground to gravel, a grave disturbed. The responsibility falls on whoever pulls it up, to know the difference between discovery and desecration. Below the keel, the archive still waits, most of it unmapped, most of it unseen, holding answers and creatures and ships we have not imagined. The ocean's memory is older and deeper than ours, and it will outlast us. When the winch finally stops and the deck goes quiet, the only question left is the one the sea never answers on its own. What will the next haul bring up? The end.